we're doing is we're being true to ourselves and our beliefs and our faith journey and navigating through that together in a way that is better. And that really touches me, that we're not out to change each other. We're just out to find ways that we would see solutions together.
Well, hello there, and welcome to the podcast, to another episode of Queerly Overthinking. I'm your host, Adam Harper, and in today's episode, this is part 2 of my conversation with my amazing sister-in-law, Mary. In part 1, we talked about the overarching question of where do you start to understand someone's different political and religious beliefs? In this episode, we're taking it a step further to ask, how can you proactively foster those relationships with someone of a different perspective? We'll focus on finding common ground and developing our opinions thoughtfully. Without further delay, let's get started. Oh my goodness gracious, Mary. Okay, literally, what an amazing first part to our discussion. I have really been enjoying this. This is just so much fun.
This is a lot of fun. Thank you. It's good to get these things out like that we've been experiencing in the hopes that other people can enjoy it as well in their interactions.
Definitely. And I really feel like everything that we just discussed really sets up things well for this next part. And, you know, as the last part had like an overarching question, this time the overarching question is, how can you be more proactive or proactively foster a relationship with someone who has a different perspective politically? So we kind of talked about like, how can you start to understand and see that? And we went through those 3 specific steps in the previous segment, but this one now is starting to like actually action on that. And how can you start to foster, to build, to cultivate a connection with somebody who, specifically speaking and politically speaking, may be different in the way that you have your own perspectives and ideals. So it kind of digs a little bit deeper into what we had, again, mentioned before. And for our listeners, we've broken down this next segment into a few steps to consider as well. And Mary, is there one that you want to start with specifically?
Well, I think what's really interesting is that there's such a variety of news sources out there. And I don't know that people have the time or interest always to read a variety of news sources. But doing that has been really helpful to me. There was a time when I think I was reading something about North Korea and I saw a little article snippet about it. And I just happened to catch a different news source that had the same content, like it was telling the same event that had happened, but it had a completely different perspective. And I thought, that is so fascinating. And so what it did was it started to get me curious. When something big happens, what are the other outlets saying about it? So I don't do this all the time and every day, but every once in a while I will go and bounce around and read all the news sources. I'll check a little AP News, see what they say about a topic. I'll check CNN, and then I'll go Fox News and MSNBC, and just for kicks, just see what everyone is saying about the same thing. And you will find very different tellings of the same story based on their perspective. And so that's kind of where I wanted to start with this, is having more than one news source. And it doesn't matter what your chosen news source is, but just finding a couple more. And that's not to really change your viewpoints. That's not the intent here. The intent is for you to see different viewpoints and to understand that there's different voices out there and try to see how they're thinking and understanding an event.
1000%. Oh my goodness. I really appreciate this setup here that you have. And it reminds me of a headline that I had seen recently where it was just, it seemed a little gamey of a headline. It seemed like it was trying to get me to click into something, to read through something, into like kind of
clickbait.
It honestly could have been clickbait, but it just felt like it was trying to sell some sort of like narrative rather than actually trying to present facts. And I think that's what's so attractive to me, is when a news source is actually just like, here are some facts for you to consider, like, and then what is the definition of a fact, and like truth, and like, how people interpret all that. But like, I try to find sources that like are presenting something without a lot of emotion or a lot of like storytelling per se, because then I'm able to then make that assumption or figure out like my narrative based on what's being presented to me rather than somebody telling me like this is how I should be perceiving like this event or this, you know, headline and such. And I think that's tricky to figure out where like, and I think that's like hard to do because you should have multiple news sources to see exactly what you're saying, you know, the analyzing the different language that's being used and to then help filter out that emotional narrative that a lot of outlets try to give us, and that way you can filter things out so you can make your own decision based off of, if that all makes sense.
Oh, for sure. I remember, I think it was during the pandemic, there was an article, and I was shocked, honestly, because this article started off with, "Can you believe she did this?" And it was, I think, referring to a government leader. And it was not in the opinion section of the paper. It was like within the first section, which is supposed to be just news, telling of events, giving quotes, different perspectives. But the journalist had put that as her first sentence. Her or him, I don't know who wrote it. But I was like, whoa. And that's really a good example to me where I watch for, is a journalist trying to make me convey an emotion? They're actually supposed to convey information. An event that occurred that I wasn't there for that they want to tell me about. And so I watch for that in my news sources to see if something is trying to impress upon me how I should feel. I'm actually the one who gets to decide how I feel about something. I just need the information to make some decisions.
Subscribe to that, yeah. And it's tricky because there are some news sources that I really enjoy, like their charts and graphs, like the New York Times specifically. I know that I've shared some articles from them with you that they like have great breakdowns of data and they visualize it in such an appealing way, and so it's
Oh, their charts are just extraordinary. In fact, during like for like 2 or 3 years, one of the tabs on my phone was their chart of, I think it was New Mexico or my county, and it would show the number of cases that were being reported because that number dictated what we could and couldn't do. And the New York Times was, I mean, just the best place. Their charts and graphs that you have sent to me are just amazing. Amazing. Whoever their staff is, I'm shout out to you guys. Beautiful,
oh
beautiful
my
charts.
goodness, love it. It's interesting to see which news sources we kind of like a buffet in a way almost, and it's really
Oh,
important
that's
to
a good way of
like,
putting it.
yeah, yeah, it literally just came to mind just now. Um, and one of the things that I'm cautious about when going to the buffet of news sources is social media specifically because of the problematic nature that it is, and it can be a good source being exposed to certain like information potentially, but like how valid and how factual is that information? Is it being filtered through something? I mean, even this year already, Meta is already starting to automatically by default filter out at least Instagram content, if not Facebook content, where it's like the default setting is filter political content for me. And I don't, it doesn't say what they're specifically filtering. It doesn't say how or how often or like what are they actually like feeding into your algorithm per se.
Yeah, I knew that this had changed one day because that's where I learned Osama bin Laden had been killed. Was on Facebook, and in that moment I thought something just shifted here. Like my news short source is now Facebook, you know, and that really kind of was just a wake up call that things had shifted. And now using only social media as your news source is just really treacherous because someone has coded it in such a way to only show you stuff that it thinks you want to see. Because the more you look at it and the more that you're scrolling, the more ad revenue that is being generated for somebody else. And so, by definition, that is not going to be a great news source for you because it's trying to guess what you want to see instead of telling you a variety of news from a variety of sources.
Well, teeing up this second point of how can you again build and foster and proactively build a relationship with someone of a different political belief specifically, the next point is developing your opinions thoughtfully. And the first few initial thoughts that I had around this were like, how do you like first react when you see a headline, and when you see that, where do you then go to like build your opinion either on that specific topic, or how does that begin to solidify for you? Again, we're trying to be very like high level about this and agnostic about it, but I'm curious, Mary, like how do you start to develop an opinion politically, like a political opinion? Like how do you begin to like formulate it? how do you look up facts? How do you look up like any research around it? If it's like, kind of broadly speaking, but how do you begin to develop your opinions?
Well, I think that's really an interesting question, and some topics are much larger and vaster than others. But I had an experience one day where I was on Amazon. I was just trying to buy an air popper, and that was back when Amazon used to show you two different reviews. They used to do that. I actually found it very unhelpful because I was always just constantly confused. Someone would be 5 star, someone would be 1 star. They don't do that anymore. But at the time, it was for an air popper, so something not politicized at all. And one review was like, it was like this. It was like, this popcorn machine is a maker of death. The popcorn kernels will pop out. They'll just fly everywhere. You have to tell your kids to leave the room because they'll touch them. They'll burn themselves. It's dangerous. 1 star out of 5, you know. And then the other contrasting opinion was 5 stars out of 5. This thing is so efficient. It's hot. It pops all the kernels except for just a few. And those ones, it's going to get a little crazy, but just warn your kids. And maybe if they go into the bowl, they may explode like 30 seconds later. So just be ready for it. And it's so fun because it's like popcorn fireworks and the kids love it. Okay, this is the same popcorn maker, but it's two different viewpoints. And I did buy the popcorn maker. It did do the fireworks things as predicted. So this was actually super helpful. But the perspective, one person saw it as a danger and one person saw it as excitement. And I think a lot of different topics are like that, where one person will see danger and one person will see, excitement. And so getting those different viewpoints really helps you think through from all different angles that issue may have and may cause to different groups of people. If is it good for one person, is it good for a million people? That's what I think is so challenging about politics, is that they have to make decisions and it's going to encompass a variety of people. So you have to look at that issue of not just how it will impact only your life, but everyone around you, your community, to help you determine if that's a good issue. So what does that take? I think it takes doing a lot of research, hearing people's stories, their thoughts, their opinions, and doing some research on that topic to see if you can learn about it. And I think that helps you really form an educated opinion and not just an emotional opinion.
I love that so much. That is such a beautiful like visual to represent that point of being able to see one thing can have completely different perspectives, but then you had to like do your own research, and you even, as you mentioned, purchased it and experienced that for yourself. And I think that's a great segue into this kind of sub question that I have here of like, if you haven't had any personal experiences surrounding this new idea, new concept, or like new political policy or new idea, do you feel like it's easy to kind of quick to judge based off of like what you're hearing from other people, or how do you hold yourself back in that way to allow yourself to see like what is this problem actually, or like what are they trying to solve, or like how what are we actually doing here, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think it would be really hard to tell someone to not have an opinion. And I think we're all entitled to an opinion. But I guess the point is that you really want your opinion to be an educated one. And I think as I have grown older and had more experiences, my opinions that I had maybe when I was 18 have developed a lot because of my experiences. So being willing to have your opinion being open-ended, being willing to change is really helpful. For example, you can see like sometimes policies have to be enacted. At some point you have to go forward and trying to help people. But then being able to look back and see the impact of that, I think is really interesting. There's a state right now that they started a policy a couple of years ago and they've actually reversed it. And so that I find is really interesting because they tried something that they did the research on, they thought would be really good, and it ended up being really bad. And so they rolled it back. And so being willing to know that sometimes you're going to have to move forward with the knowledge that you have, but being willing to look at it objectively and go, that did work or it didn't work. Or it worked, but not the way I wanted it to, or not enough, and then being able to revise your opinions, much like our leaders revise their policy, is really helpful.
Mm, mm. Mary, I love that so much. I feel like it kind of alludes to like your scientific background, if I'm correct, right? Like you studied in the branch of sciences, right?
Yeah, I have an engineering degree, so I guess that makes me have a more analytical approach. And you can look at data and it can help you, or you can discard it and just decide I know what's best. And I really feel like looking at data is very helpful. Now you have to look at who creates the data too and how they did it, but we just do the best we can with the information that we have.
I have absolutely loved all these points that we're discussing, and I might be most excited about this point specifically because this has just been the most eye opening and just mind expanding one for me. And it's focusing on the common ground that you have. And before we get into it, I really would love it if you would share the tweet. I don't know if we still call them tweets or not, but that Jason had shared about finding that common ground.
Right. I think we've teased this, but I'm not sure if we've even really said this that Jason, my husband, Adam's biggest brother, is a politician. And he's been serving in the New Mexico House for about 12 years. And he's actually retiring at the end of this year. But he had a tweet, whatever we want to call it, recently that was about capitalizing on the 10% that we agree on. And that has been so helpful to him in his politics. He's been called the bridge between two parties. And he has really inspired me and Adam to kind of look at common ground differently because there's so many voices in the world that tell you that if you're a Democrat and you're a Republican, you're just not going to agree. There's no common ground. And we see that a lot. I mean, it's almost demonstrated to us in the way that there's dysfunction in governments. But Jason has really done a good job of teaching us both that there's always common ground and finding that 10% and then trying to take that forward and capitalizing it is so awesome.
Y'all, I cannot tell you enough how much I love this statement so, so, so much because as I was really thinking about it or overthinking, queerly overthinking it, I was just like in awe that like there's so much in that 10% if you actually really think about it that there's so many things you can talk about. There's so many things that you can expand upon. And like if you just play within that 10%, you actually realize that there's just like it's a lot bigger than you think. And I think it just helps to break down the narrative that, you know, someone who may be different than you in some way, it helps to break down that like you have nothing in common. It's like, no, you actually have like a lot in common, even if you just start with that 10% and see how it can stretch and build and then actually show you that you do have so much more in common with this person. So anyway, I just love that so much. Thank you so much for sharing that, Mary.
Yeah, that was something that the friend I referred to at the beginning, that's one of the things we discovered. We didn't even know at that time in our very young lives and young friendship that there was common ground between two people of different perspectives, and we found it. And it was a beautiful thing. And so I think it's always to be found. There's just so many people out there who are so polarized, and they're often the loudest ones. And they would make us think that we cannot agree with the other side. But it's a falsehood because most of us are going to find that common ground, and capitalizing it is the most important.
Was it Abraham Lincoln who was like, if you look for the bad, you will surely find it?
That sounds right.
I think it might be, but regardless if it is or isn't, I'll have to actually double check. But I do really like that phrase because you know if you're gonna look for something, you're most likely gonna find it. And I just feel like if you're focused on disagreeing with somebody, then you're probably going to disagree with them. But if you're focused on trying to like find that common ground, find that commonality, find the good, then you're more likely going to find that. You know, my therapist shared with me energy goes where focus goes. And I'm like, oh, it's so good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of the quotes that I love that has been really helpful, it says, "The person who agrees with you 80% of the time is a friend and an ally, not a 20% traitor." And I think that most of us are 80% friends. But there's so many voices that are polarizing out there that will tell you that if you are on different sides of the spectrum, you're only a 20% traitor. And that is just, we're just missing out on so much. And that quote was actually by Ronald Reagan. I wanted to say that last because, again, when people hear Ronald Reagan, they automatically, if the listener had a reaction to that name, then that kind of shows how you may have some preconceived notions and some feelings and thoughts and probably personal experiences. And maybe that initial reaction was either good or bad. But I feel like no matter what, that quote still holds that we are 80% friends. What this guidance here is just to capitalize on the 10% that we agree on, is not even to try to find the 80%, but just starting on the 10. Just start right in the center and see where it takes you. And you may be able to grow it to 30 or 40%, or maybe it's just going to stay right there at that 10%, or maybe you're going to find it's a lot bigger. And I feel like for most people, it's actually a lot bigger than they realize. They think maybe it's like 1%, but actually, when I've talked to people of different perspectives, and my husband has too, it's bigger usually, and it's shocking in a good way.
That's such a great point. And it really tees up the next kind of little share out that I wanted to walk through. It was this Instagram post that you had shared. When people actually start to like get down to the nitty gritty and not just, painting people with a brush based on their beliefs, this Instagram post was asking, what do Democrats like about Republicans and what do Republicans like about Democrats? And so Mary and I actually went through each of these points, and I think there were maybe like 10 points or something like that, but we like picked our top four or something that
That was
we
a lot of compliments they gave each other. It was amazing.
definitely. It was hard to like whittle it down to these 4 points, but I would love to both of us share. Do you want to go first?
Sure, yeah. So in this post, of course, Adam said it had like 10 points. I narrowed it down to four that I really loved. Republicans said that they like the Democrats. Number one, support social causes and desire to lift people out of difficult circumstances. This is something I really admire in Adam. The other person is they want all Americans to have easier access to the American dream. Taking that statement alone, I think we would all say that. But that's specifically what Republicans said they admired about Democrats. Another one was to pursue equality. And the last one I picked was love the way that they celebrate diversity. They're more open minded and accepting of people who don't fit a certain mold. So I loved that.
Love it. Oh my goodness. Thank you for sharing that. The top four from what Democrats said that they liked about Republicans that I narrowed down on support fiscal responsibility and keep spending in check. And I think that's a really big one for me, seeing specifically how my brother Jason, his time and tenure in the New Mexico legislature, really trying to like overhaul a lot of things. Or like, I don't know if the word overhaul is correct, but more so like, how can we approach this in a better way? Like, how can we be wiser with like the stewardship that we have over this land and this like people and the funds that are brought in and such. And so I really appreciate that about him. The second point being having a strong love of the Constitution and a belief in hard work paying off. Like, I agree with this point because even though there are some people who have had good choices presented to them, there's still a choice to accept those choices in front of you or to like go through and accept, if this is making sense, of like, you may come up, depending on whatever background or upbringing that you have, there is still a choice that you have to make to accept benefits of that background or not. And so I think like, speaking from my own experience, I still had to choose to like wake up and go to my courses and my college classes and to like work hard. And, I could have made decisions to not do that. And so like, I really appreciate this point of belief in hard work specifically on that one. So the third point is are committed to freedoms. And I admire this one so much because specifically with you, Mary, and our relationship and just seeing how you are committed to defending both your beliefs and viewpoints and way of life as much as you are defending and standing up for my viewpoints and ways of life. And that means so much to me to be able to like have that commonality there. And lastly, the fourth point is try to keep big government small and allow states' rights to govern. I thought this was very fascinating as well because it's difficult to approach things in a one size fits all. Very rarely is that successful or well implemented to try to do like a large big decision. And it's, but also sometimes too it can be, it's a balancing act between big government versus states' rights and allowing them to govern. So being able to see how you have shared that with me, that insight of pros and cons of different ways of thinking through that, that's really been beneficial to me to be able to see that and to also interpret that in my own way and understand that. So anyway, I hope that makes
Oh,
sense.
well, thank you. What I really loved about this Instagram post is that it helps us see the 10% that we can capitalize on. We can see the other side and what is good about them. And that's such a good opening point for having that understanding of different viewpoints.
Well, to kind of wrap things up in a way, I just want to think about this question of like, how can we continue to support people in their journey? And as you said, Mary, like their faith journey in that way too, both religiously, politically, any other ideology. And I really feel like it starts with just like spreading love and positivity. And I really feel like if we want to, sure, like we can find ways or find something that we don't agree on with someone and just choose to focus all of our time and energy and attention towards that. But as I've been really working through intentional mindsets and through thought process in therapy, I've really come to love the idea, as mentioned earlier, that energy goes where focus goes. And you can choose to focus on spreading that love and that positivity and connection and support and building one another up and building your community up. All of that ties back to the points that we discussed. And from both parts, I'll share what those were. So it was going in with the idea that you can make a friend, listening to each other, letting go of preconceived notions, using multiple news sources to help develop opinions thoughtfully, and focus on the common ground and the common good between you.
I love it. I think it's great. And it's just been such something that we've been successful at. So I hope that this can be duplicated for other people, because I love what you're just talking about in seeing the good. There's just so many ways that we can see the bad and get so depressed and depleted. And so seeing the good is really going to be a helpful thing in our world. We need more of that.
I could not agree more. And Mary, I just feel like if there were more people in the world who, even just a tiny, tiny little bit, even if they just like practice even a few of these points that we discussed, I certainly am not going to say I'm perfect in this by any stretch of the imagination. I still fall into the traps of painting somebody with a brush just because they believe in XYZ. And it's taken a lot of time and a lot of effort to recognize it so that way I can then see it and then action on that so that way I can improve myself and like improve my relationships and improve the ability to make new friends and new relationships and connections. So thank you for that point.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. I've really enjoyed being able to share these things with people. And I just wanted to share one more quote that I found. It was by M. Scott Peck, and he said, "You cannot truly listen to anyone and do anything else at the same time." I feel like in our world, we have a lot of people who would say that they're listening, but really what they're doing is that they're trying to think of what to say next to try to move someone's opinion. And I think before you even try to persuade someone on your ideas, you just truly have to be listening. You have to see it from their viewpoint. You have to just be willing to understand where they're coming from. Let it guide your opinion, all the different sources that you take in, and then see where it lands you. And I think that just listening is something we need more of to help us in our world so that we can really be better friends and better people to support each other. And it's not to say that we have to agree with each other 100% of the time, but I think that we need more people who listen and try to understand each other. And right now, we just have people who are maybe they've already decided about someone. I just really love, Adam, that our relationship and being able to talk about all these issues has showed me that when I listen and then you give me the honor of listening to me, we actually create something, some ideas and thoughts that are better than if one of us brought it up alone.
Oh my gosh, literally, yes, yes, yes. I cannot like express how much that means to me to be able to like see those points coming together and to be able to see our perspectives like merging and being able to like have that ability to listen to one another. It just means so, so much. And I really do feel like the more that we listen to people, the more likely you're going to like build a connection that you're able to then show each other, not each other's perspectives alone, but you're also able to like maybe perhaps see how you can both help build a bridge between those beliefs, but then also see how people are open to potentially like shifting mindsets and like open to new experiences, open to new ideas, new ways of life, and things like that. And it really does start with just like being willing to listen and being a good friend to somebody. And everything that you said, literally, like double tap, 100% subscribe. Let's go.
Well, thanks. And I think that one thing that has been really encouraging is that you and I have retained our belief system. We still are the people we are. We're not like throwing away and giving up who we are to find that 10% to capitalize on. What we're doing is we're being true to ourselves and our beliefs and our faith journey and navigating through that together in a way that is better. And that really touches me, that we're not out to change each other. We're just out to find ways that we would see solutions together.
Literally, yes, all of that. Because I feel, and this is something very recent that like I've been thinking about, the fact that we can both have our belief systems, whether it's religion, politics, any sort of way of life, and yet still wholly accept one another and support one another. And I love that so much because it's like, and it feels genuine. It doesn't feel like I'm having to put on a mask or having to like
Yes.
present myself in any type of way. It genuinely feels like you care about me and I care about you. And it's the magic.
It is. Yeah, that's right. The magic's is in the middle. So it's great.
Definitely. Well, folks, that is a wrap. Mary, I am so honored to have had you here on the podcast. Thank you so, so much for being here with me today.
Thank you. It's been great. Bucket list item checked off.
Love it. Love it. And for everyone listening, thanks again for taking the time to make space with us, share space with us, listen to this conversation today. And I hope it was insightful, and I hope that it resonated with you today. And I know I'm excited to listen back to this episode and to not only edit it, but then to keep listening back to it. But with that said, y'all, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. Queerly Overthinking is hosted, edited, and executive produced by Adam Harper, with additional producing by Cass Cooper. You can follow Queerly Overthinking on Instagram or TikTok at Queerly Overthinking, and you can find more at www.queerlyoverthinking.com.